לעניין הבא, אחד מראשי ועדת החקירה של מועצת זכויות האדם של האו"ם בנושא ישראל אמר שישראל לא צריכה להיות חברה באו"ם. בנוסף הוא טען כי הרשתות החברתיות נשלטות בידי הלובי היהודי לדבריו. שגרירת ארצות הברית במועצה אמרה כי הם מזועזעים מההערות האנטישמיות והאנטי-ישראליות, ועכשיו קמה קריאה לפטר את הנציב. מצטרף לנו עכשיו הלל נויר, מנכ"ל UNRWA. שלום, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lital. It's a pleasure to be here.
So basically, this commission member is questioning whether Israel should even be a member in the UN?
That is correct. This is an investigator of a commission of inquiry who is obliged to be impartial. And in an interview, he actually questioned Israel's right to be a member of the UN. He has never questioned the right of Iran, Syria, Pakistan, China, Venezuela to be in the UN. But on Israel, he is questioning their right to be in the UN. It's absolutely outrageous.
And the other members of the UN Council, how are they tolerating this?
Well, look, this Human Rights Council created this commission of inquiry 1 year ago because of a resolution by Pakistan on behalf of the Islamic States and the PLO. So the commission of inquiry from the very beginning was designed to target Israel, to promote Hamas. But I have to say that we've seen something interesting, and I think we should give some credit to the Israeli diplomats. 15 countries have now condemned this anti-Semitic investigator, not only the United States and Canada, but Belgium, Norway, France, Germany, Austria. 15 countries have now condemned him for anti-Semitism. Even the UN Secretary General has called out Mr. Milun Kotari for his anti-Semitic remarks. That's a good thing.
Wow. And now you're saying that this commissioner needs to be fired,
well,
right?
Absolutely. Look, the UN rules are clear. UN investigators, including members of a commission of inquiry, are obliged to be impartial, and this includes, in the language of the UN rules, having no prior public statements that show bias towards one side. These investigators, including the chair, Navi Pillay, are extremely biased. The chair herself, Navi Pillay, has said that countries should sanction apartheid Israel, ! She signed a petition 2 years ago calling on countries to boycott what she calls apartheid Israel. So it's absolutely absurd that Navi Pillay or Milun Kotari should be on this commission. They should be removed immediately. And of course, the commission itself should be disbanded. The entire purpose of the commission is to strengthen the Hamas terrorist organization, to weaken Israel. It has nothing to do with justice. This commission is a travesty of justice.
I think that you were talking about strengthening the Palestinian Authority. In general, the UN is funding UNRWA, who is basically maintaining this conflict, not solving it.
That is correct. And indeed, it was the Swiss foreign minister, who is today the president of Switzerland, Ignacio Cassis, said just a few years ago, exactly as you put it, Lital, UNRWA is not solving the conflict, it is only perpetuating the conflict. Money that we are giving, we in the Western states, democracies, are funding this conflict going forward, and UNRWA is not there to solve it. For example, UNRWA is funding 2 million Palestinians who live in Jordan, who've been there for 70 years. They are Jordanian citizens. They are not refugees. The whole point of UNRWA is to basically undo 1948, to undo the borders of Israel, to send back, millions of Palestinians who were not born in Israel. It's absolutely absurd. It is not there to help Palestinians. It is there, as you said, to perpetuate the conflict. And America is giving hundreds of millions of dollars. Biden just announced, I think, $200 million more. Germany is funding it. All the European countries, Canada is funding it, and they should not be funding something that is designed to perpetuate conflict. And that's what UNRWA is.
And I think it's also important to mention that they have one rule or one law to the refugees of the Palestinian, Israeli conflict, and another law for all the rest of the refugees in the world.
That is true. Lital, my office in Geneva, Switzerland, is right next to the UN Refugee Agency. They deal with tens of millions of refugees around the world. They have much less staff than UNRWA, which is only dedicated for the Palestinians. And the point is, the UN Refugee Agency, called UNHCR, they're designed to solve refugee problems, to make people stop being refugees. That's what they do. They resettle people. UNRWA is the opposite. UNRWA is not trying to help Palestinians Palestinians settle in Jordan or other places. They're designed to make sure that they're not settled so that they will be standing there as an ongoing political grievance as the state of Israel. In effect, the Palestinians are being used by UNRWA and its backers as a political weapon against the state of Israel.
And by the way, we were talking about this commission. You have countries like India, like other countries who are very friendly to Israel, yet again, in the UN, time and again, you know, choosing the wrong side. Is Israel doing anything about it?
Well, I think Israel is trying very hard to fight against UN bias. We saw that in recent years, Israeli leaders made visits to Africa, and we saw that certain African countries changed their votes. It is very much an uphill battle. We're going back 50 years since the Soviet Union, together with the Arab and Islamic states, turned the majority of UN states against Israel, using the oil weapon, using the weapon of sovereign wealth funds. Billions of dollars from Qatar might flow to your country or not, depending on how you vote. And vote trading. There are 56 Islamic states. There is one Jewish state, and they will vote trade to make sure they get what they want. So it's very hard for Israel to get countries to change their votes, but it's very important, and we have to keep fighting to get countries to treat Israel equally, which is what the UN Charter promises.
And you know, I've been following your amazing work for quite some time. You've been doing an incredible job with UN Watch, monitoring what is happening in the UN. I have to ask you, how are you not discouraged with everything that's been going there for years? It feels as if you're banging your head in the wall time and again.
Yes, I think that's a good question. And indeed, Lital, there are times when I'm at the UN sitting there and hearing not only dictatorships one after another speak about human rights, to hear the Chinese dictatorship speaking about human rights, or Vladimir Putin's representative speaking about human rights, but also democracies that sadly will take the floor and attack the only democracy in the region, which is Israel. And it is discouraging, but we fight back. We tell the truth. We expose abusers. And I'm happy to say that in the past week, as I said, some 15 countries have condemned this anti-Semitic investigator, UN Secretary General, even the President of the Human Rights Council. We have supporters, tens of thousands of supporters around the world who support us financially, who sign our petitions. It means a lot. We're fighting back. We're telling the truth. And we have no choice. The UN is not going away. We have to be there to fight for what is right, to fight for democracy, to fight for freedom, to fight for equal treatment of all states. And we refuse to give up.
And thank God, Baruch Hashem, that we have you there in Geneva. Hillel Neuer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Lital.
אנחנו יוצאים עכשיו להפסקת פרסומות אחרונה, מיד אחר כך איך חיילי צה"ל מוציאים גימלים בעזרת הטיק טוק, וגם למה ביפן החליטו לשים מאווררים על חיות המחמד שלהם. הפסקה קצרה, מיד חוזרים.